A quiet home in California. A family of 4. One day, they're living their normal lives, the next, they're gone. No trace. No struggle. Just gone. The McStay family left behind everything, food still on the table, their beloved dogs abandoned. But if they left on their own, why did they never come back? Their car was found near the Mexico border, but there were no signs of them inside. Did they run? Were they forced to leave? Or was something far more sinister at play? A blurry security video showed a family walking into Mexico. But was it really them? And if so, why did they disappear without a word? For 3 years, the case remained unsolved. But in the middle of the California desert, the truth was buried beneath the sand. What was found shocked the nation. It wasn't an escape. It wasn't a disappearance. It was cold-blooded murder. And when the truth finally came out, the betrayal was closer than anyone could have imagined. Before tragedy struck, the McStay family seemed like the picture of happiness. A beautiful home in Fallbrook, California. 2 young boys, just starting their lives. Loving parents who worked hard to give them everything. Joseph McStay was a self-made man. A dedicated husband. A father who wanted the best for his boys. He had built a successful business, custom water fountains, turning creativity into profit. His wife, Summer, was a devoted mother. She lived for her children, documenting their growth with endless photos and videos, cherishing every moment. Their 2 boys, Johnny and Joseph Jr., were just 4 and 3 years old. Their world was filled with playtime, cartoons, and the kind of joy only childhood can bring. But behind the success, stress was creeping in. Joseph's business was growing, and with it came pressure. He had a business partner, Charles Chase Merritt. A man Joseph trusted. A man who worked closely with him, but who also had his own troubles. Joseph and Chase worked together on the water fountain business. Chase handled fabrication, turning Joseph's designs into reality. But what Joseph didn't know was that trust can be a dangerous thing. So let's pause here for a moment. A hard-working father. A caring mother. 2 young children who had their entire futures ahead of them. And a business partner with financial problems. What do you think? Would you trust your closest business associate with your financial future? With your life? The McStays had no idea that someone in their circle was harboring dark intentions. To the outside world, their life seemed perfect. Their home in Fallbrook was a peaceful retreat, surrounded by nature. But even in paradise, danger can lurk where you least expect it. What would you do if someone close to you, someone you trusted, had everything to gain from your disappearance? February 4, 2010. The last day anyone saw the McStay family alive. It was an ordinary day. No warning. No signs of trouble. By the evening, their home was silent. Their car, gone. Their phones, silent. It was as if they had vanished into thin air. Days turned into weeks. Weeks into months. Investigators were left with a haunting question: where had they gone? Were they running from something, or someone? Their disappearance would baffle detectives for over 3 years. But when the truth finally surfaced, it was worse than anyone could have imagined. February 4, 2010. A day like any other. The McStay family was living their normal routine in Fallbrook, California. No frantic calls. No distress signals. Nothing to suggest that in just a few hours, they would vanish without a trace. But by the next morning, silence. Days passed. No one had seen or heard from Joseph, Summer, or their two boys. Friends and family grew uneasy. Calls went unanswered. Texts ignored. The family had seemingly vanished overnight. Joseph's brother, Michael McStay, was the first to raise the alarm. He knew his brother wouldn't just cut off contact. Something felt wrong. When officers arrived at the McStay home, what they found only deepened the mystery. The house was untouched. No broken windows. No overturned furniture. Nothing to suggest a violent struggle had taken place. But something was off. The family's beloved dogs, left behind, unfed, locked in the backyard. For anyone who knows pet owners, this was a huge red flag. No loving family leaves their animals behind like this, unless they had no choice. Then, a strange discovery. The McStay's white Isuzu Trooper, a family SUV, was found abandoned near the U.S.-Mexico border in San Isidro. Inside, nothing unusual. No blood. No signs of struggle. Just, left there. As if they had simply walked away. So, what would you think? A family of 4 disappears, leaving their home as if they planned to return. Their car turns up miles away, but they are nowhere to be found. If you were an investigator, where would you start? At first, authorities leaned toward one theory: they had left voluntarily. A surveillance video surfaced, showing a family of 4 crossing the border into Mexico. Could this be them? It seemed plausible. Maybe they wanted a fresh start. Maybe they had gotten involved in something they needed to escape from. Maybe they had been running from danger. But there was just one problem: the people in the video? They weren't the McStays. Despite the growing concern from family and friends, authorities were convinced the McStays had disappeared on their own. Maybe they had fled to Mexico. Maybe they were living off the grid. Months passed. No ransom demands. No signs of struggle. No real leads. And just like that, the case started to grow cold. Here's where things get frustrating. The police believed the family had left willingly. That they had taken their children and started a new life somewhere. Because of this, no serious investigation took place in the early days of their disappearance. But here's the question: why would they leave everything behind? Their money, their pets, their unfinished meals? What do you think? Would you suddenly abandon your life, your home, your business, your entire identity, and never contact your loved ones again? For 3 years, their case remained a mystery. Their family held on to hope, searching for answers. But little did they know, the truth was far worse than they ever imagined. Because in 2013, their fate would finally be uncovered. And what authorities found buried in the California desert would haunt everyone who followed the case. For nearly 4 years, the McStay family was nothing more than a haunting mystery. No solid leads. No confirmed sightings. No ransom notes. Just an eerie silence that left more questions than answers. Then, in November 2013, that silence was shattered in the most horrifying way possible. A man, out for a routine dirt bike ride, was cutting through the Mojave Desert when something caught his eye. At first, it seemed like nothing, just a strange disturbance in the sand. But as he got closer, he realized it was much more than that. What he found would end a mystery but begin a nightmare. Buried beneath the scorching desert sun were 2 shallow graves. And inside them were skeletal remains. 2 adults. 2 children. The bodies had been there for years, hidden just beneath the surface, waiting to be found. But whose remains were they? Was this the final resting place of the missing McStay family? Or did the desert hold even more terrible secrets? It didn't take long to get the answer. Forensic tests confirmed the worst. The remains belonged to Joseph, Summer, and their 2 children. Nearly 4 years after they disappeared, their bodies had finally been found. But with discovery came more horrifying questions. What had happened to them? Why had they been buried in the middle of nowhere? And the biggest question of all, who had done this? The autopsy reports were brutal. This wasn't an accident. This wasn't a case of a family lost in the wilderness. Joseph, Summer, and their 2 innocent children had been bludgeoned to death. Their skulls shattered by a blunt object. This was personal. This was violent. This was pure evil. But the desert didn't just hold their bodies. It held evidence. Clues that would finally crack the case wide open. Who could have done something this horrific? And why? If this was a targeted attack, what had the McStay family done to deserve such a fate? For years, authorities believed the McStays had disappeared voluntarily. But this discovery changed everything. Now, this wasn't a missing persons case. It was a murder investigation. And the killer had gotten away with it for almost 4 years. Think about that. Someone had slaughtered this family and buried them out here, confident they'd never be found. Confident that the world would just move on. Confident that the desert would keep their secret forever. But now the secret is out. And the search for a murderer was about to begin. The discovery of the McStay family's remains sent shockwaves through California. Who had done this? And why? The case, once cold, was now burning hot. Investigators were about to uncover a twisted betrayal, a hidden motive, and a shocking suspect, one who had been right under their noses the entire time. Who do you think was responsible? Do you believe this was random, or something far more calculated? Let us know your thoughts. With the McStay family's remains uncovered, the case took a chilling turn. This was no longer a missing persons investigation, it was a cold-blooded murder. And now, detectives needed to answer one question: who had the most to gain from their deaths? For years, theories ranged from a cartel hit to a personal vendetta. But the truth? It was hiding in plain sight, buried under a trail of money and lies. One name kept surfacing: Charles Chase Merritt. A longtime friend and business partner of Joseph McStay. On the surface, Merritt appeared harmless, just another struggling businessman. But beneath that friendly exterior, he harbored a desperate secret. Merritt was drowning in debt. And his biggest vice? Gambling. Casinos had become his second home. He was hemorrhaging money. Thousands of dollars gone in hours, each bet riskier than the last. And as his financial troubles piled up, so did his desperation. What do you do when you owe more than you can pay? When the walls start closing in? When the only way out is something unthinkable? Shortly after the McStays vanished, Joseph's bank account activity took a bizarre turn. Large sums of money were disappearing, but not because of Joseph. Someone else had control. That someone was Chase Merritt. Authorities discovered Merritt had been writing fraudulent checks from Joseph's account, cashing them just days after the family vanished. But here's where it gets even more sinister. These weren't just small transactions. We're talking thousands of dollars siphoned away, right under everyone's noses. Why? Because Merritt thought no one would ever check. After all, Joseph wasn't around to stop him. By the time investigators pieced this together, Merritt had already stolen over $21,000 from Joseph's business account. And if that wasn't suspicious enough, he didn't even try to hide it. He used his real name to cash the checks. Almost as if he believed he had gotten away with it. But money wasn't the only thing connecting Merritt to the crime. Investigators were about to uncover something far more damning. Cell phone records. One of the most damning pieces of evidence in modern crime investigations. A digital fingerprint that can place you in exactly the wrong place, at exactly the wrong time. And when authorities pulled Chase Merritt's phone records, they found something disturbing. Merritt's phone pinged near the very location where the McStay family's bodies were discovered. He had been there, near those shallow graves. And he had been there right around the time they were murdered. Think about that. What are the chances that the man who stole from Joseph also just happened to be near the burial site? Was it a coincidence, or was it proof? The case was unraveling fast. Investigators had a clear financial motive. They had forged checks. They had phone records placing Merritt at the crime scene. But they still needed one more piece, the final nail in the coffin. And when confronted, how do you think Merritt reacted? Did he break down and confess? Or did he dig in deeper, weaving a web of lies so tangled it would eventually choke him? The walls were closing in, and Chase Merritt knew it. But he wasn't going down without a fight. He would deny everything, claim innocence, and even accuse others of the crime. But the truth? It was staring investigators in the face. They just needed to prove it beyond a doubt. And what they uncovered next would be the most shocking revelation yet. The investigation had led authorities to one conclusion. Chase Merritt wasn't just involved, he was their prime suspect. But did they have enough to take him down? Could they convince a jury? Or was Merritt about to slip through the cracks, walking free, despite the mountain of evidence? What do you think? Is this enough to prove his guilt, or is there still room for doubt? Let us know in the comments below. After nearly 5 years of speculation, rumors, and dead-end leads, the moment of truth had arrived. The man authorities had been circling, the man who had stolen from his own business partner, lied to investigators, and whose cell phone data placed him near the gravesite, was finally about to face justice. November 2014. A team of heavily armed officers move in. Their target? Charles Chase Merritt. The man who once called Joseph McStay his best friend, now the prime suspect in his brutal murder. The arrest shocked everyone who knew him. To many, Merritt was a skilled craftsman, a business partner, a trusted friend. But prosecutors saw something else, a greedy, desperate man willing to do anything to cover his tracks. The charges? 4 counts of first-degree murder. If convicted, Merritt could face the death penalty. But was the evidence strong enough to seal his fate? The trial of Charles Chase Merritt would be one of the most high-profile murder cases in California's history. Packed courtrooms, national media coverage, and an emotionally charged jury selection, all leading to one question: would Merritt be held accountable, or would he escape justice? Prosecutors wasted no time laying out their case. They argued that Merritt had a clear motive: money. He had been embezzling from Joseph McStay's business, forging checks, and when Joseph found out, Merritt saw only one way out: eliminate the entire family. But how would the defense fight back? Could they convince the jury that Merritt was not the killer? Merritt's legal team pushed back hard. Their argument? That the prosecution's case was built on circumstantial evidence. Yes, Merritt's phone pinged near the gravesite. But was he actually there at the time of the murders? Couldn't there be another explanation? And what about the checks? Couldn't Merritt have been taking the money for business purposes, not as part of a murder cover-up? Could there have been someone else involved? What do you think? Was the prosecution's case airtight, or was there room for doubt? But no amount of legal maneuvering could erase the horror of what happened. Family members of the McStays took the stand, fighting through tears as they described the agony of waiting years for answers, only to learn their loved ones had been murdered in cold blood. "We prayed every night they'd come home," one family member sobbed. "We never imagined this. The evidence was overwhelming." And when Merritt was given the chance to testify in his own defense, he made a fatal mistake. Merritt took the stand, insisting he was innocent. But under cross-examination, his story began to fall apart. Why did he cash those checks right after the McStays disappeared? Why did his phone place him near the gravesite? Why had he lied to investigators about his whereabouts? He had no answers. And as his credibility crumbled, so did his chances of walking free. After months of testimony, the jury reached a verdict. The courtroom fell silent as the foreman stood. "We, the jury, find the defendant guilty. Guilty on 4 counts of first-degree murder." The McStay family would finally get justice. In 2020, Charles Chase Merritt was sentenced to death. The man who once called Joseph McStay his friend would now spend the rest of his life behind bars, awaiting execution. But was justice truly served? Or did this case leave behind more questions than answers? What do you think? Did Merritt act alone, or could someone else have been involved? Let us know in the comments below. The case was closed. The killer was behind bars. But for the family and friends of Joseph, Summer, and their 2 innocent boys, there would never be closure, only pain, anger, and questions that would never be answered. How could an entire family of 4 disappear into thin air, and for nearly 4 years, no one knew what happened? How could investigators overlook the most obvious suspect, the man stealing from Joseph and lying about it? The McStays should have been living their lives, watching their children grow. Instead, they became the center of one of California's most tragic, preventable crimes. One of the biggest controversies in this case was how authorities handled the investigation from the start. From the moment the family vanished, law enforcement believed they had left on their own. No forced entry, no blood, no immediate signs of violence. And then, the SUV, found near the border. A family that looked like the McStays was seen crossing into Mexico. That one clip shaped the entire investigation. Instead of treating the case as a possible crime, authorities treated it as a runaway case. But here's the problem, the footage wasn't them. The McStays never crossed into Mexico. They were already dead, buried in the Mojave Desert, while police searched in the wrong direction. What if they had focused on the right suspect from the beginning? Could the McStays have been found sooner? For Joseph's father, Patrick McStay, the pain was unbearable. He had spent years begging authorities to look deeper, to treat this as a crime, not a voluntary disappearance. I told them from the start that something was wrong. But they wouldn't listen, he said, his voice breaking. Summer McStay's sister, Tracy Russell, also spoke out. "I still wake up and think, maybe they'll walk through the door. Maybe this was all a mistake. But it's not. They're gone." For their loved ones, the reality was cruel, the McStays weren't missing. They were murdered. And for nearly 4 years, their remains sat in shallow graves, waiting to be found. The mishandling of this case raised serious questions. What went wrong, and how can we make sure it never happens again? First, why weren't red flags raised immediately? Joseph McStay was a dedicated father and businessman, not the type to abandon his life. Summer wouldn't leave without telling her family. The idea that they just walked away never made sense. Second, Chase Merritt was right there. He was the last known person to see Joseph alive. He was stealing money days after they vanished. Why wasn't he interrogated sooner? And finally, why did it take a random dirt biker to find their graves? In all that time, no one searched the Mojave Desert, not even once. Joseph McStay. Summer McStay. Johnny and Joey Jr. They weren't just names in a news story. They were a family. A husband and wife. Two little boys who should have had their whole lives ahead of them. Their lives were stolen by greed, betrayal, and a failed system. Charles Chase Merritt will spend the rest of his days waiting for execution. But no punishment will ever bring back what was lost. What's left now is a painful legacy, a story of how trust can be shattered, how justice can be delayed, and how sometimes the truth is buried for far too long. As we look back on this case, we have to ask, could this have been prevented? What if authorities had acted sooner? What if Chase Merritt had been caught before he could cover his tracks? And here's a question for you. Do you believe Merritt acted alone? Or could someone else have been involved? Justice was served. But for the McStay family, it came far too late. The McStay family never saw it coming. They trusted the wrong person. They let him into their home, into their lives. And in return, he took everything from them. They had no idea that betrayal was lurking so close. But here's a question for you. How well do you really know the people in your life? Justice was served, but was it enough? 4 lives stolen. A family wiped out. No second chances. Did Merritt truly act alone? Or is there still more to this case than we've been told? The McStay family is gone, but their story will never be forgotten. Their fate is a reminder of how quickly life can change, how easily trust can be shattered. So now, we turn to you. What do you think? Do you believe justice was truly served? Or were there still unanswered questions? Let us know in the comments. If you found this case chilling, there's so much more we need to talk about. California's most shocking crimes. The cases that haunt us. The ones that make you wonder, who can you really trust? Subscribe and turn on notifications, because you don't want to miss what's coming next. Stay alert. Stay safe. And remember, sometimes, the scariest monsters aren't strangers. They're the ones standing right beside you.